So I finished Nukitashi 2 and overall I had a fun time. I think I give the first one a 7 for a couple reasons, but I get why people see it as like an 8 or a 9. This one is kind of conflicting because Nukitashi 2 is basically 2 parts, the new plot and then the respective routes, and then just the after stories for the rest. There's 9 scenarios in total, but technically there's like a really short 10th one. The first scenario is the common plot and where most of my praise goes to. You can technically just end it right there and leave with like a consistent 8 or maybe even a 9. The general gist is he got too into his fleshlight thing and somehow transported himself into like an alternate reality. The 3 prominent FS characters from the original, Ikkoku I think, and Rei and Touka barged into his house and were sent alongside with him. The only difference between the worlds is basically that June accepted the offer that was given to him, I think, in the 3rd route and maybe the 4th route as well from the original. It might have been the 2nd one too, but I forgot. Anyways, he's now basically the new face of the island, but all 4 of them are trying to get back into their own world. A lot of hijinks happen, but in general it's just about June being in the opposite side this time around. There's some higher highs in the original, but that's mostly because the final move isn't as cool and it overstayed its welcome at the same time. And I remember talking about that the original had like a lot of repetition, its humor. That reminds you of like people that made a funny joke one time, but then repeated like every fucking day and it's like, can't we just move on? It's not fun anymore. And that's basically what Nukitashi 1 was. That's pretty much gone in this scenario. It's still kind of there depending on the option you picked, but it's still relatively minimal even in that one route. Speaking on the options, it should have been placed later on. It's one of the only slight issues I had with the common route altogether. Each choice will lead you to a different route after you finish the scenario 1, so basically the first 6 to 8 scenes for each route happens in the common route as well, but the first or 2 scenes cover things that'll be referenced later on, like some of the other members in the FS, or in Touka's case it covers the FS as a whole. Sure, their sections eventually revolve around themselves, but sometimes one of these minor characters end up talking to you, and it's like, oh, you just have to go by context. As an example, I'm not sure if I'd even care about the FS if it started with Rei. Touka feels like the character you have to go through first, but then later on by the end, it's like, okay, they have all these other characters, and these just specific 2 is like, okay, they're from this squad, I understand, it's all by context. But if you go in a different order, then you know these 2 people, but then I'm not sure if you even care about their perspectives as much anyways, like, alright, who cares? I'd still say just go with Touka first, and it does tell you that Touka is the 2nd scenario, and that's like your clue. But then again, in the original, Misaki was numbered after Hanami, and that's just like a step back. It makes no sense why it was like that. Anyway, none of that is actually a big deal, it's just more noticeable because everything else is pretty much done well. The writing is consistent, the flow never feels like it's dragging, overall it's a great time. The easiest way to explain is like I finished the first scenario in like 1 weekend, and then Touka's route, which is much shorter, took me the whole week. It's not even that her route is bad, it's actually fine, but I'll get to that later on. The basis on the original was more so on perspectives and how easy it is to stay in your own like echo chamber. Each side has their own merits, but all of them just keep on fighting for their own and then just demonizing the rest. This one is more on acceptance. It's just a gradual expansion of the first one, and it was done really well, to the point that I think the whole experience is lessened when you consider that there's still like 8 more scenarios to go through. So I can make an argument like, hey, just end the EVN right here. It ends at a great note. But the characters themselves get an epilogue after you finish Fumino's after story, which I'm pretty sure that at least needs like 1 scenario to be finished, and you know, it leads to like, okay, maybe there'll be a future sequel, who knows. Anyways, the following 3 scenarios do still cover the whole acceptance aspect, but it's no longer the main attraction. Depending on your choice, you'll hit one of these 3. They just cover the 3 characters that were launched with them into the alternate reality or whatever. It was one of those things where I haven't seen anybody actually prefer the original characters over these 3. Overall, their routes are also fine, so I'll be covering a little of each route, but if you'd rather just finish one route and then just leave, you can have Touka if you want like a continuation of what they're going for in the common route, or you can go with Rei if you prefer the humor, or you can go with Ikkoku if you want like an impact moment like the Erectus scenes in Nukitashi 1. Rei ended up being my favorite, and it was one of those characters that was already loved in the original. She's the most comedic outside of Misaki, and overall what you get from her route is what you expect. It's more that her route was just funny and how she's just total mess half the time. It's a constant teetering between like cute, funny, heartwarming, and cringe. A bunch of her H scenes is what I expect from Nukitashi, and it's a lot more comical. The voices are kind of unhinged at times to the point that it's a good compromise between like an actual Nukige and like a Kusoge. And it's like, it's great. I had a lot of fun with this one. Ikkoku was the one I was most interested in, and I ended up not being a huge fan of it. I think the finale's impact is something more reminiscent to the original, and it was a lot more fun from it, but on the other hand, her route had a lot more repeated conversations, and I guess if your specific kink is getting made fun of, then it's a perfect route for you. Otherwise, like, dude, shut up. It's been like 3 times. It's fine, I get it. Like, it's funny, but it goes on for so long. It's also the first time I felt the H scenes went on for long as hell too. Something that wasn't really an issue in the original. This does happen in the following routes, it just starts here. In the end it was still good, but it's one of those things where I actually liked her more in Misaki's route than here, which is kind of funny. There was a couple things that could have gone a little bit more, but maybe it become too much of a lecture if they kept bringing it up, or it'd be too boring. It's like, okay, everybody has a problem, I get it. And I think that's what they're going for. Is like, okay, here's like my backstory. It was tragic. Don't care. And I think that's part of it, because like she doesn't want you to see yourself as weak and crap like that. It makes sense. It's fine, but it's also like there was something there and you kind of skipped it. Touka's route is probably the best continuation for the first scenario. It carries on the idea of understanding others and that they can be trying their hardest and you just don't notice it. Not to say that the other two routes don't have any of that, it's just more prominent in Touka's route. Sure, she's an extreme edge case, no one would fault you for giving up on this one. She's specifically built to be an exaggeration of like the savant syndrome. Outside of her job, she's at the same functional level as a baby. Outside of that, her H scenes are also really boring, and there was one scene where I think it was split into 3 parts, and it's like, why? This is awful. And I guess it wasn't even that long because each part was like very minimal. It just became long when you add them all up together, I guess. Asane's art was kind of a waste in a way. The first half is hilarious and it's just them coping about what they're doing and all these H scenes. I think the first 2 was, yeah, they're funny. The next 2, holy shit, can we just continue, or it's done, we get the point. It wasn't even that funny anymore either. But it does end up with something I have no clue about. Like, so apparently there's this relative. It could have been mentioned in the original, but I just don't remember. Anyways, this relative gets mentioned in the epilogue of the last scenario too, and I still have no clue who this guy is, because the dialect could be pointing to like 3 different people. I'm not sure why it was even brought up or how it's relevant to the plot either. I asked about it once, I searched around, I couldn't find anything about it. So tell me if you do, I guess. Anyways, before I started it, I assumed it would revolve around like World B's June in Asane. It would have been a lot more interesting than what we ended up getting, but if all you want is like an FD experience, yeah, it delivers, it's fine. Like, it's to the point that the common route had a lot better stuff with Asane than her actual route. Nanase's afterstory is actually a huge improvement over her route from the original. A lot of that was due to June, but the Ichis were just pretty shit then as well. They're still not good now, but the scenes around them are just hilarious. It doesn't hit the levels of Misaki, but it's still great. Misaki's afterstory is as immensely retarded as a route, and so it's my favorite one again. They ended up trying to make an eroge of just different versions of Misaki, but they're broke, and they just make a mockery in some of parts of the development. They know it's a kusoge and went harder into it. Some of her H-scenes are really long though, and it's like, oh holy shit, this again. But overall, immensely funny, and I wish a lot more of it was like this, but yeah, what can you do? The rest of them are basically the same, even Misaki. Basically, if you like their characters before, you'll still like them now. If you like the rap before, you still like them now. They're still fine, they're fun. There's enough tomfoolery going around, it's fun, it covers what they wanted. At the end of Fumina's afterstory, you get an epilogue on what they're all doing and how it could technically be like a stepping stone for future titles. I don't know if they're ever going to do anything with it, but I think there's like a prison title afterwards, and I think only 1 character's in there, but whatever. We'll see, who knows. Maybe, I think they also had prison too. Maybe there's more characters in that one. Overall, I like this one a lot more than the original, more so with the common route. It's written well, it's consistent, and never really broke down its own flow, so it's easy to go through in all like one huge burst. The characters are still great, the jokes are less redundant, and considering the context, you care about the characters more often than you did in the original. There's even parts that match Ray's section in the original as well. Funny enough, Ray gets another scene just like that. It's like, oh, you're coming back with this again? It's still great. I feel like they really wanted Ray to be like a main choice. So this is now spoilers, and it's been a while since I read the first one, and I don't remember Rin being this annoying. To be fair, she wasn't around all that much anyway, but still, holy shit, she was repetitive. Teshima wasn't around all that much this time around, which is kind of sad since he was one of my favorite characters in these titles. Instead of the reckless move from the original, he made some Spider-Man web slinging stuff where he just has to repeatedly come all the time, and it was funny at first, but I felt like it was a little too drawn out. And I think that was more because when the Erectus move showed up, right, it made a huge impact and then it was over. This web slinking one was like, oh, it just keeps on going. It's like a couple of minutes here and there, and it was also like a lot less in terms of like the rule of cool. The other one was, holy shit, you're blocking RPGs, and this one's like, I'm web slinking. It's like, all right. But things like the rule of cool also gets put into like Ikkoku's route, where he basically does a big bang tank out of his dick to blow up a meteor. It's like, oh, this is funny and also really cool. It's a lot cooler than this web slinking thing. Anyways, so Touka vomits when she tries doing things that goes against her, like her beliefs or her mindset. So if you can work around it, it can still coincide with her style and she won't like vomit anymore. So like the common one is like using stairs for her. So if she goes up or down, she just throws up. It would have been funny if the epilogue shows that Touka can walk upstairs. Like, hey, she actually learned how to do it. But then when she goes down, she throws up again. And it's like, all right, it's like a little punchline, but instead she just vomits, even trying going upstairs again. It's been like a decade. And I get that's part of the message, and that she's still trying, and June is still being understanding, still appreciates the effort, but at least give her something, like the most bare bones progress. It's like, no, she didn't do anything. She didn't progress at all. It's like, holy shit. My favorite scene with Rei is probably when she was just like a belligerent drunk. At least it's probably the most funny H scene in the title, alongside making fun of her a couple more times afterwards. It's not like, oh, right afterwards, like right afterwards, and maybe like half an hour later I'll make fun of her again. It's hilarious. She and Ikkoku had like a pretty shady past. They could have done more with Ikkoku, but I feel like they were trying to not overdo it to the point that it becomes repetitive. I think I already talked about this before, but yeah, I think you know what I mean. Nanase's ending is basically them doing what they did in Route 3 or 4, where they went and saved Fumino, and it's great. Like I said before in the beginning, it really felt like a bad ending before, right? June's also super jacked right now. I think he had all these jokes in there where it's like he has a name for all his muscles, like, all right, deltoid, attack this guy's like, are you retarded? And it's funny. I think I broke down laughing during Misaki's route where they're running out of time to make this eroge because like, oh, their vacation was, I think they had like 2 days left or whatever. They're like, oh man, we ran out of time. We still all need all these sound effects. And then Asane was like, fuck it, let's just put gunshot sounds as when he's coming. That's the sound effect. And everybody's like, that's genius. And then they did it, and then he showed it, and just, I think it was like 10 minutes later, it was like, okay, now you see the guy coming, and just like, it was like 6 or 7 gunshots just going out everywhere. It's like, oh, it was funny. I like that a lot. And that's basically it. This one took a little longer than the other ones because I was sick for a bit, and then I was playing GPF Relink, and I pretty much capped out on that, and that took a while. And then I was playing Sea of Stars, and I'm still playing that, but getting close to the end of that as well. And I'm reading Ito Sekai, and I'm not having a good time with it yet, but I'm also really early on. I didn't even hit a route yet, so at least the first couple hours are really boring. But who knows? I hope it changes because I really like Memoria. So, the same company, it should be fine, but who knows?